The evening air over New York carried a restless chill as Daniel Voss, founder and CEO of Relay, fastened the strap of a delivery bag across his chest. To anyone watching, he looked like just another exhausted food courier weaving through traffic. But Daniel wasn't out here for necessity. He was out here for truth. Tonight's route would take him into the Upper East Side, a neighborhood where wealth dressed itself in marble and power disguised cruelty as taste. His final stop glowed from the corner of East 74th Street, the mansion of Ms. Evelyn Keating, a woman known in select circles for her social gatherings as much as for her sharp tongue. Inside, guests in glittering gowns and polished tuxedos awaited their meals, sipping wine while laughter echoed across the ballroom. Among them, Aunt Lila Keating, Evelyn's elder aunt, sat quietly in her wheelchair. Her eyes, though dimmed by age, missed nothing. She often said little, but when she did, her words pierced silk like a needle. On the street, Mr. Whitmore, an elderly neighbor walking his tiny dog Daisy, paused at the sight of the delivery rider arriving. From the opposite side, Sophie, a runner cooling down with stretches, slowed her pace just enough to notice. And across the courtyard, Elena, a young nanny rocking a stroller, kept her eyes on the mansion's golden lights. Each of them would become an uninvited witness to the night's performance. Daniel parked his bike, adjusted his cap lower, and approached the heavy door. He was not the CEO anymore. He was simply a rider. And the lesson waiting beyond that door would test which mattered more, titles or dignity. The door opened, spilling golden light onto Daniel's dusty shoes. Ms. Evelyn Keating herself stood framed by chandeliers, pearls resting against her collarbone like trophies. Her eyes flicked from the delivery bag to his worn hoodie, and disdain curled her lips. "You're late," she said loudly, enough for her guests to hear. Daniel kept his tone steady. "Traffic on Lexington, here's your order." She didn't take the bag. Instead, she turned to her guests, laughter already brewing. "Everyone, this is what passes for service these days. Food lukewarm, riders sweaty, excuses rehearsed." From the foyer, Aunt Lila's voice cut through. "The food smells fine. Perhaps kindness would make it warmer." Evelyn ignored her aunt, focusing on her audience. "Tell me," she said to Daniel, "is this how you make a living? Riding through the streets like a stray?" The pearls flashed under the lights as the room erupted in laughter. On the sidewalk, Mr. Whitmore stopped mid-step, Daisy tugging on her leash. Sophie leaned into her stretch, eyes narrowed. Elena hugged the stroller handle, murmuring to the baby inside, "Shh, little one." Daniel stood silently, holding the weight of more than just food. He had walked into a theater where cruelty was the main act, and Evelyn was determined to make him the punchline. Daniel placed the bag gently on the table near the door. His movements were precise, deliberate, as though refusing to match the chaos of Evelyn's scorn. "Your dinner," he said, voice calm. Evelyn scoffed. "Dinner or disappointment?" She pushed the bag back, her manicured fingers recoiling as though it carried disease. "Take it away. We don't eat mediocrity." In the corner, Clara Keating, Evelyn's young daughter in a ruffled dress, peeked from behind the staircase. "Mommy, it smells good," she whispered. "Go upstairs, Clara," Evelyn snapped. "This isn't for children." But Aunt Lila leaned forward in her chair, eyes on the child. "It is always for children to learn what dignity looks like." On the street, Mr. Whitmore raised two fingers in a quiet salute toward Daniel, his silent way of saying, "I see you." Sophie shifted uncomfortably. Her runner's breath caught in her chest. Elena's eyes glistened, as if she had felt this scene herself on smaller stages. Daniel exhaled slowly, accepting the bag back into his arms. Not a word of anger left his lips. He turned from the laughter, from the chandelier glare, from the pearls that shone like armor. He stepped into the night air, where the real witnesses stood, watching not just a man, but the way a man chose dignity over retaliation. Block 04. The city's judgment. As Daniel walked down the mansion steps, the city held its breath. Wealth had mocked him inside, but outside, a different stage waited. Mr. Whitmore nodded firmly, Daisy pressed close to his leg. His lined face carried quiet approval, as if saying, "Not all of us are blind." Sophie straightened, removing her earbuds. She had seen endurance in marathons, but this was another kind, silence stronger than shouting. Elena rocked the stroller gently, whispering in Spanish, "Él tiene fuerza." He has strength. Behind the door, Evelyn's laughter continued, but out here, it sounded thin, brittle, desperate to convince itself. Daniel tightened the straps of the bag across his shoulders. The night wasn't over. A lesson had been staged in arrogance, but another would soon rise in truth. And New York, restless and watching, was ready to remember which story mattered. The streets grew darker as Daniel pedaled away from the mansion, the insults still hanging on him like smoke after a fire. His legs moved with practiced rhythm, but his mind replayed every detail. Ms. Evelyn Keating's sharp voice, the sparkle of her pearls under chandelier light, the laughter of her wealthy guests echoing as if cruelty had been served as dessert. At the next corner, a traffic light caught him. Another rider pulled up beside him, breathing hard, his chain squeaking with every push. He looked younger, the kind of face still carrying hope under fatigue. "Rough night?" the rider asked, glancing at Daniel's delivery bag. Daniel gave a half smile. "Some orders don't go as planned." The rider stuck out his hand despite the sweat. "I'm Nico. First week. Already feels like a year." Daniel shook his hand firmly. "Stay safe, Nico." Nico nodded, already pedaling when the light turned green, disappearing into another alley of the restless city. Daniel turned into quieter blocks where brownstones glowed with family dinners, real laughter spilling out, not staged for power. He stopped at a food pantry run by a familiar volunteer. "Daniel," said Elena, the young woman juggling boxes and kindness in equal measure. "We weren't expecting you tonight." He held up the extra meals. "These didn't make it to the table. Thought they might belong here instead." Her tired face lit up. "You have no idea how much this helps. Families are already lined up for tomorrow." Daniel's voice softened. "Food should never go to waste." Elena touched his arm briefly. "You always show up at the right time." As he left, riding back into the veins of the city, Daniel's grip tightened on the handlebars. Last night's cruelty wasn't just a personal wound, it was a reminder. Some doors needed a different kind of delivery, and he was ready to bring it. Daniel slipped in through the service entrance of his skyscraper headquarters, still in the hoodie, dust clinging to his skin. By the time the elevator doors opened on the 60th floor, he was already shedding the disguise and walking back into the world that knew him as Daniel Voss, CEO of Relay. Inside the war room, Marisol, his head of operations, looked up from the glowing maps of the city. "So, you went out again," she said, eyes catching the road dust still on his face. Daniel nodded. "Had to feel the asphalt myself. What have we got?" She pointed to the cluster of complaints on the screen. "Same address, East 74th, 3 returns, all food edible, all rejected." Daniel's jaw tightened. That was Ms. Evelyn Keating's mansion. I was the rider. Murmurs rose in the room. Jonah, his assistant, shifted uncomfortably but stayed silent, letting Daniel take the floor. "We're setting a new protocol," Daniel said firmly. On the whiteboard, he wrote in bold letters, "Dignity handling, respect first, humiliation pauses service. Support always, riders backed instantly, no penalties. Transparency matters, complaints logged, but paired with data. Community impact, returns automatically donated." Marisol smirked. "This will cause noise." Daniel's answer was steady. "Better noise than silence. Silence protects the wrong people." Morning light poured between glass towers as the leadership team gathered. Daniel arrived last in a navy suit, posture calm but unshakable. "Last night," he began, "a rider was humiliated. That rider could have been anyone. In fact, it was me." Gasps spread across the table. Jonah's pen stilled mid-scribble. Marisol just nodded, already knowing. "We will not allow our people to be treated as props in someone else's theater," Daniel said. "From today on, dignity is part of the delivery." The policy rolled out and every leader understood. This was not a suggestion. It was law inside Relay. Outside the building, Sophie, a jogger who had witnessed last night's cruelty, scrolled on her phone, already seeing hashtags about the delivery guy trending. The city was whispering. Soon it would roar. By afternoon, a black sedan stopped outside Ms. Evelyn Keating's mansion. Daniel stepped out, this time in his CEO's suit. At the gate, he knocked. The door opened to Evelyn herself, pearls again at her throat, arrogance rehearsed on her lips. From the foyer, Aunt Lila Keating wheeled forward, her wise eyes glinting. "Good afternoon," she said. "Shall we take this in the courtyard?" Neighbors gathered again. Mr. Whitmore with his tiny dog Daisy, Elena the nanny rocking her stroller, Sophie slowing mid-run to stretch. The audience had returned. "I'm Daniel Voss," he said calmly. "I founded Relay. Last night I delivered your dinner." Her mask cracked. "You're joking." "I don't joke with dignity," he replied. He explained the new dignity handling protocol, his voice steady, carrying not just to Evelyn, but to the watching neighborhood. "We serve food and dignity. Both must arrive warm." From the foyer, Clara Keating, Evelyn's little daughter, peeked out. "Mommy, is he the man who brought the food?" she asked innocently. "Yes, Clara," Daniel said gently. "And I'm here to make sure people are treated kindly when things go wrong." Clara nodded, like when I spilled juice. The crowd softened. Even Sophie whispered, "That's the line." Daniel ended it simply. "People will forget what you served them. They won't forget how you served yourself." And with that, he turned, leaving Evelyn with a choice and the city with a new standard. The story of what happened on East 74th Street did not stay behind the mansion's doors. New York has a way of carrying stories, whispering them through subway tunnels, attaching them to steaming carts of roasted peanuts, folding them into the hum of cafe chatter. By morning, what had been a cruel spectacle in a gilded dining room had become an echo spilling across boroughs. Sophie, the runner who had witnessed the humiliation from the sidewalk, posted a short line on her community forum. "I saw a delivery guy get mocked by rich guests last night. He stood there with more dignity than anyone inside." She didn't know his name, didn't know he was Daniel Voss, but her words carried a spark. Dozens responded, adding their own encounters with disrespect that had felt too small to matter until now. Mr. Whitmore, walking Daisy at dawn, stopped to chat with his neighbor outside the corner deli. "The writer kept his cool," he said, adjusting his hat. "Didn't give them the show they wanted. Reminded me of something my father used to say. The loudest voice isn't always the strongest one." The deli owner nodded, carrying the story inside to the first customers of the day, who carried it further still. And Elena, the nanny, couldn't shake the memory. Rocking the stroller that morning, she whispered to another mother in the park. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't bow his head. He just walked away with strength. "I don't even know who he was, but I won't forget it." The mother told her husband that night, and the husband told his co-worker at lunch, and by the time the sun set again, the story had walked further than Daniel ever could on his bike. Inside Relay headquarters, Daniel tracked none of this directly. His focus was on the riders. He visited the training room where new recruits sat with their helmets on their knees, faces tired but hopeful. Nico was there, quieter than the rest, eyes darting every time a phone buzzed. Daniel crouched beside him, lowering his voice. "How's the city treating you today?" Nico shrugged. "Better. I didn't get yelled at. Just ignored." Daniel nodded slowly. "Ignored isn't good, but it's better than laughed at. And tomorrow, it'll be better than ignored. That's how change works, one door at a time." Nico frowned. "But what if it doesn't? What if this is just the job? People don't really change. Daniel's gaze steadied, his voice firm but calm. People don't always change fast, but cultures can. And we're writing culture here. Every bag you carry, every street you ride, it's not just food. It's presence. One day, someone will remember your face when they needed kindness most, and they'll pass that on. For the first time, Nico's shoulders eased. A small seed of belief took root where doubt had been gnawing. That night, Daniel walked the city again, not as a rider this time, but as a man listening to the air. In Queens, he overheard two teenagers on the subway mimicking Evelyn's cruel tone, then laughing at how absurd it sounded. In Brooklyn, a bartender told her customers about the rider who stood taller than pearls. In the Bronx, a grandmother told her grandson a bedtime story, not about kings or dragons, but about a man who delivered food and carried dignity in his bag. Daniel realized something profound. Last night had not been a humiliation. It had been a spark. And sparks in a city like this do not stay small. They find paper, fabric, hearts. They spread. He returned to his office just before midnight. On his desk, the framed scrap of paper with his guiding principle waited for him. See early, solve without harm, close with dignity. He touched the frame with 2 fingers and whispered almost to himself, "We're just getting started." By sunrise, the story had already crossed into places Daniel couldn't bike to, even if he tried. Boardrooms, newsrooms, the polished tables where investors measured worth in quarterly charts, not in moments of dignity. At Relay headquarters, Jonah entered Daniel's office with a tablet tucked under his arm, his expression carrying both urgency and hesitation. The city ledger piece went live, he said. Headline reads, "When food isn't the only thing delivered, CEO spotted riding in disguise." Daniel leaned back, calm. They figured it out. Not just figured it out, Jonah continued. It's everywhere. Shares are climbing, not just stock shares, social shares. People are reposting the part about you standing at the Keating mansion. They don't even care about the food. They care about the silence you kept. Moments later, Marisol burst in with her laptop open, breathless not from running but from the pace of the news cycle. "Daniel, the board wants reassurance. Investors are nervous. They like innovation. They don't like unpredictability." She turned the screen to him. A news ticker scrolled. Relay CEO confronts wealthy customer. Company introduces dignity protocol. Daniel studied the words. The world had taken his quiet stand and turned it into a headline. He wasn't angry. He was thoughtful. "Good," he said. "Now they know what we stand for." In another part of the city, at a skyscraper with glass that glittered like arrogance, Ms. Evelyn Keating sat at her vanity, scrolling her phone with trembling fingers. Every social platform repeated her name, though none officially confirmed it. A wealthy hostess, an Upper East Side mansion. People didn't need the address to know it was hers. She clenched her jaw, pearls pressing into her skin like accusations. Aunt Lila rolled into the room. "Quite a chorus outside, isn't it?" she said, her voice calm. Evelyn snapped the phone shut. "He ambushed me. He used my home as a stage." "No," Aunt Lila corrected softly. "You did that. He just declined the script." Meanwhile, Daniel sat with Nico in the break room away from the noise of press and policy. Nico scrolled on his phone, eyes wide. "They're talking about you everywhere. You're not just a CEO anymore, you're like a symbol." Daniel chuckled lightly. "Symbols are dangerous, Nico. People will either worship them or tear them down. That's why we don't build symbols. We build systems." He tapped the boy's phone, closing the feed. "And systems protect people like you." Later that afternoon, Jonah returned holding a folder like a man carrying something sharp. "The investors want you on a call. They're concerned about reputational risk." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Reputation? We just protected 31 riders from humiliation. That's not risk, that's reputation." On the call, voices crackled from across the world. Men and women in tailored offices asking about margins, customer retention, liability. Daniel listened, patient. When they paused, he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "Relay doesn't just deliver food. We deliver presence. We show up at doors most of you will never see. And last night, one of those doors tried to turn a worker into a prop. I happened to be that worker. I chose silence over spectacle. Today, millions are talking about it. Tomorrow, millions more will order from us. Not because of faster apps or cheaper fees, but because dignity has no competition. That's your margin." Silence followed. Then one voice, older and slower, spoke. "I invested in this company because you were bold, Daniel. Don't stop now." The call ended without fireworks, just a sense that the ripple had touched the top and left a mark too deep to erase. That evening, walking out of the building, Daniel paused on the steps. Across the street, Sophie jogged past, recognizing him now not as a stranger but as the man from the mansion. She raised a hand in greeting. Behind her, Mr. Whitmore tipped his hat, Daisy tugging the leash toward Daniel as if dogs always know who carries truth. Daniel smiled faintly. The city was shifting. Not fast, not loud, but steady. And somewhere inside her mansion, Evelyn Keating sat in silence for the first time in years, realizing that power built on humiliation can crumble faster than pearls sliding off a broken string. For the first time in years, silence filled the Keating mansion. Not the polite silence of wealth, where conversations pause for champagne refills or for someone to be introduced, but the heavy silence that arrives when truth has entered a room and refuses to leave. Ms. Evelyn Keating sat at the head of her dining table, the same place where only nights ago she had orchestrated humiliation as though cruelty were a centerpiece. Now, the table was empty. The phone in her hand buzzed with messages she didn't dare open, acquaintances canceling luncheons, whispers about whether she had been the hostess in the headlines. Reputation had been her currency, and suddenly, it was leaking like water through cracked glass. Across the room, Aunt Lila maneuvered her wheelchair closer, her voice quiet but unrelenting. "Your pearls don't shine as brightly when no one comes to look at them." Evelyn snapped. "Do you think this is funny? That man humiliated me in my own home." Lila's gaze held steady. "He didn't humiliate you, Evelyn. You did that yourself. He simply declined to share the stage." Before Evelyn could retort, a small voice echoed from the staircase. Clara, barefoot in her pajamas, had been listening. Her eyes were wide, her innocence unfiltered. "Mommy," she asked, "why did you yell at the man who brought the food? He was nice. He didn't yell back." The word struck Evelyn harder than the headlines. She stiffened, pearls trembling against her collarbone. "Clara, go back upstairs." But Clara stepped closer, her little hands fidgeting. "Did you make him sad?" "Because I think he was sad when you laughed. Why did you want people to laugh at him?" Evelyn opened her mouth, but no rehearsed line arrived. No script, no armor, just a hollow where explanations should have lived. For the first time in years, her daughter's eyes did not reflect pride or awe. They reflected confusion, disappointment. Aunt Lila reached out, resting her thin hand on Clara's shoulder. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "sometimes grown-ups forget that kindness is the only real wealth, but you remembered." Clara leaned against her aunt, still staring at her mother. "If the food man comes back, I want to tell him thank you." Evelyn swallowed, her throat tightening. She wanted to protest, to say it didn't matter, that appearances were more important than apologies. But something in Clara's gaze dismantled her defenses. Children have a way of exposing what the world disguises. Later that evening, Evelyn stood before her mirror, pearls still around her neck but heavier than iron. She replayed the scene, not from her perspective, but from Clara's. The laughter, the dismissal, the way Daniel had stood in silence. The city now whispered about dignity, but her daughter's question was louder than all the voices combined. Downstairs, Aunt Lila murmured to the empty room, as if the walls themselves needed to hear it. The city saw a rider. We saw a man. And one day, Evelyn, you'll need to decide which one you saw. That night, Evelyn did not sleep, and for the first time, she wondered if her daughter's small voice carried more weight than all the pearls she owned. The city did what cities always do with stories. It reshaped them, retold them, made them larger than life. What had started on one sidewalk now threaded itself into subway conversations, cafe counters, and digital feeds glowing in every borough. But this time, the story didn't shrink as it spread. It grew. On a rainy morning in Brooklyn, a group of delivery riders huddled under a storefront awning, waiting for the storm to ease. One of them pulled out his phone and read aloud the article about Daniel Voss. "He was one of us," the rider said, voice thick with awe. "He took the hit, and he didn't swing back. And he's the CEO." The group fell silent. For men and women used to being unseen, the revelation felt like a spark of recognition. At a midtown cafe, Sophie the runner sat with a friend, recounting what she had witnessed outside the Keating mansion. "I saw the man they're talking about." He didn't say a word while they laughed at him, but somehow that silence was louder than their voices. Her friend recorded part of the conversation and posted it online. Within hours, thousands had liked and shared it, commenting, "This is what dignity looks like." Meanwhile, Mr. Whitmore, never one for social media, told his story the old way, face to face. At his synagogue, he described how the rider with the dusty shoes carried himself taller than the pearls inside the mansion. "My Daisy barked once," he added, and even she knew who the better human was. His congregation chuckled softly, then nodded, carrying the image with them. Even Elena, the nanny, found her own circle shifting. At the playground, other mothers asked her about the night. "You were there, weren't you?" they whispered. Elena told them how Daniel had left with silence instead of anger, how he later donated the uneaten food. "It was the first time I saw someone so powerful act like one of us," she said. For women juggling strollers, groceries, and invisible labor, the story struck deep. The ripple reached places Daniel hadn't planned. CEOs from other industries issued carefully worded statements about respecting frontline workers. Some were genuine, most were not. Yet the fact that they felt compelled to respond at all showed how much oxygen the story consumed. In the press, op-eds bloomed. "What we owe the people who carry our cities." "Dignity delivered, lessons from Relay." Talk shows debated whether Daniel had been reckless or revolutionary. The louder the debate grew, the more ordinary people weighed in, and their voices carried a clarity the pundits lacked. At Relay's headquarters, Daniel watched quietly as Marisol updated him. "Rider applications are up 40% this week. People want to work here because of the protocol." Customers are also split. Some say they'll never order again. Others say they'll only order from us now. Daniel nodded. "That's fine. We don't serve everyone. We serve those who understand food comes with humanity." Jonah entered with a cautious smile. "The mayor's office wants to meet. They're asking if Relay would share its dignity handling model with other delivery companies." Daniel leaned back, considering. This was never about PR. But if policy can grow from it, then yes, we'll share. That night, as he left the building, the city lights reflected off puddles in fractured brilliance. Daniel paused, feeling the rain cool on his skin. For once, he didn't feel like he was carrying the city alone. The city was carrying the story with him. And in her bedroom across town, Clara Keating whispered a prayer in the dark. "God, please help the food man not be sad anymore." Beside her, Aunt Lila closed her eyes, knowing that sometimes the smallest prayers shift the largest storms. The morning Evelyn chose to leave her house without pearls, the sky was the color of unpolished silver. She dressed in a simple blouse and flats that did not click against the marble, and she did not summon a driver. Clara insisted on coming. Children know when a day requires witnesses. And Aunt Lila rolled beside them, the motor of her chair a soft, steady hum. Outside, Mr. Whitmore lifted 2 fingers as they passed, Daisy trotting like a metronome at his heel. Sophie noticed them from across the avenue and slowed her run without intruding. Elena looked up from the stroller and offered a small, encouraging nod. Neighborhoods always know when a scene is changing acts. At Relay headquarters, security didn't blink. The receptionist, who had seen every kind of apology and most of its counterfeits, called upstairs. Jonah appeared in the lobby, polite as rain. "Ms. Keating," he said simply. No surprise, no theater. He led them to a conference room with a window that overlooked the city like a possibility. Daniel Voss entered without entourage, without the Navy suit's sharp angles, just a dark jacket and the quiet authority of a man who understands beginnings. He took in the unlikely procession, a woman made smaller by the weight of her choices, a child made larger by the clarity of hers, and an aunt whose gaze held both of them to their better selves. And then he nodded as if greeting a weather change. "Thank you for seeing us," Evelyn began, voice thinner than the crystal it once resembled. The sentence scattered. Pride's grammar had abandoned her. She looked at Clara, then back at Daniel. "I behaved poorly, not because the food was late, because I made a person into a prop. I am sorry." Silence, the good kind, opened its hands. Daniel did not rush to fill it. He let the apology land and take root in the soil it needed. "Thank you," he said. "That matters." Aunt Lila angled her chair a fraction. "We cannot return last Thursday," she said, "but we can spend the next 1,000 in a better currency." Daniel gestured them to sit. "Here's what we can do," he said, and the room felt the structure of an engineer in his words. "We'll lift the service pause after a conversation, not only with you, but with your building staff. Expectations in writing, for both sides. And I'd like to invite you to tour our writer center. See what it takes to carry heat across a city that refuses to meet us halfway." He looked to Clara. "There's a kitchen. We can arrange cake." Clara brightened. "I saved a slice at home," she announced, as if producing a treaty. "It's in the cold part." Evelyn's laugh surprised her. It arrived unarmored, a sound from before the masks. "We would like that," she said. Then more softly to Daniel, "And I would like to do more than apologize. Can we fund something? Not my name on a wall, something that repairs what I tried to break." Daniel considered, then nodded. "There's a hardship fund for riders. It keeps tires on bikes, heat in apartments, medicine on shelves. We keep it quiet on purpose." He paused. "You could keep it quiet too." A small exhale left Evelyn, gratitude mixed with relief that her penance didn't require parade. "Quiet," she repeated. "Yes." They walked the rider floor together. Marisol met them by the training map, the walls pinned with weather patterns and routes color-coded like arteries. She shook Evelyn's hand the same way she shook Daniel's. Equal pressure, equal person. She taught Clara how to wrap an entree with 2 hands, how to press the lid until the container sang a little seal. Clara took the lesson seriously, tongue peeking from the corner of her mouth. And when she finished, she announced, "I can do it again," as if practice itself were apology. Nico passed the doorway and slowed, drawn by the gravity of the unexpected. Daniel waved him in. "Nico," he said, "this is Ms. Keating and Clara." Nico's eyes flicked from Daniel to Evelyn, recognition passing over his face like a cloud's shadow. He did not smile widely. It isn't easy to rearrange your insides that fast. But he nodded, and the nod meant "I accept." Evelyn met it with one of her own. "I am sorry," she told him, "for all the men and women I've made small because I hadn't yet realized how tall you were." Nico shifted, awkward in the way people are when grace finds them unexpectedly. "It's okay," he said, then corrected himself, brave enough to reach for precision. "It wasn't okay, but it can be better." They stood in the doorway a moment longer, 4 people discovering how city-sized stories shrink into rooms and change shape into something livable. Outside, clouds thinned. On the steps, Sophie leaned into a stretch and snapped a photo of the sky, not of the people. She posted it with the caption, "Some days the air feels lighter." Mr. Whitmore fed Daisy a treat and told a passerby, "It's the damnedest thing. Kindness actually works." Elena texted her mother, "La gente puede cambiar. People can change." And her mother sent back 3 prayer hands and a heart. The boardroom had its own epilogue that afternoon. Daniel spoke to the directors not like a man defending a quarter, but like one defining a decade. "We didn't lose a customer," he said. "We gained a standard. If we hold it, the right customers will find us, and the wrong ones will teach their children better." The director, who had invested for boldness, nodded again. Numbers came later, already drifting upward on screens that never learned the smell of soup or rain. But everyone in the room understood. Whatever line Relay had crossed, it could not uncross it, and no one wanted to. That evening, the Central Park bench received its teller again. The old narrator, creased hands, steady eyes, opened his notebook as the last warmth of daylight bled into the trees. "Sometimes," he said to whoever would listen, "the richest lesson wears the humblest disguise. A city will crown arrogance for a season, but it keeps its thrones for those who carry grace." A writer taught a mansion to listen. A child taught a mother to see. And a company remembered that profit is a poor god if it demands we sacrifice dignity on its altar. He closed the notebook and let silence do its old patient work. Then he added, almost tenderly, "If someday a black car stops at your door, let it be because you invited a conversation, not because your cruelty did." He stood, joints arguing the way old friends do as they rise. Somewhere in the park, a saxophone practiced a song, wrong notes becoming right ones through sheer persistence. The city inhaled, exhaled. Lights flicked on in windows like stars remembering their lines. Daniel biked one last lap through streets that looked the same and were not. He passed a delivery rider balancing more than food. He raised a hand, and the rider returned it. 2 small flags in a private parade. He turned north toward a bridge that never cared who crossed it, only that they did. At home, a small girl placed a piece of cake in a too large container, writing for a tired person in careful block letters. In a quiet office, an aunt wrote a check and sealed it without ceremony. In a mansion, a woman slipped her pearls back into their box and shut the lid softly, as if putting away a language she no longer wished to speak. And in a city that had watched a man be laughed at and a man refuse to return the favor, a new story took root, one where food arrived warm, and so did we. "Thank you for walking this road with me," the old man says, hat in his hands. "If this story found you on a hard day, let it remind you, no one is just anything. We are what we deliver when nobody's clapping." Fade. Soft city sounds. Bench emptying into night. If this moved you, stay with lived stories. There's another seat on the bench tomorrow.